The next type of study that we're going to look at is called a case control study. And with case control studies, this is actually a type that's done quite often in health. Because if you think about it, is it ethical? If I'm studying smoking and I suspect that smoking causes cancer, is it ethical to ask someone to smoke? And the answer is no, it's not. So with case control studies, these are called retrospective studies because we look back to see what had an effect. So we start with people who are already ill and we look back to determine their exposures. And that exposure, when I say exposure, it could be a chemical exposure or it could be a behavior. It could be something in the environment or it could be something the person's doing. It could also be something genetic. So when we say exposure, that's what we're referring to. In these case control studies, we will focus on a smaller number of people, whereas with a survey, you can survey many people very easily. With a case control study, especially since you're looking at ill people, you are focusing on a smaller number of people. And you look at people who have the disease and you compare them to what we call our control group. So this is a group of healthy people who have a lot of the characteristics other than the disease of the diseased group. So what you have to do is you have to find and match cases with the cases of people that are sick. So if I have a group of people who are sick, I find out their age, their gender, the socioeconomic status, things that might contribute to developing that disease, and I try to find a group of people, I match them with a group of people who don't have the disease and share those critical characteristics. So, case control study. Here is it graphically represented. So I have a group of people that has the disease, okay? And then I select participants, people that do not have the disease. And I look for the people that have the disease. How many had the exposure versus didn't have the exposure? How many had the exposure, didn't have the exposure? And then I compare the two groups. So this is how we do a case control study. So here is an example. Researchers want to know if drinking cow's milk is linked to women developing polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS. So they enroll 100 women in the study, 50 of them who have the disease, the PCOS, and 50 of them without the disease. From there they can compare the two groups, cow's milk consumption, and explore statistically significant differences. Now, significant differences, what we're talking about there is this is a probability term that using math, we determine if different numbers are truly different or if they just happen by accident. So when you see research and it says that there was a significant difference between the two groups, that means that there truly was a difference. So with this example, what does it look like graphically? So here we have the 50 women who have the disease, and we have selected 50 women who don't have the disease. And we find the women that have the disease, how many of them drank cow's milk, how many didn't drink cow's milk, and we do the same for the group that didn't have the disease. And then we compare. So if of these 50 women, 49 drank cow's milk and 1 didn't, and of this group, 10 drank cow's milk and 40 didn't, the statistical analysis will probably be significant that drinking cow's milk has an association with developing the disease. Now it's important to note that there's an association. It still has not established cause and effect. Also, for this particular investigation, it would be important to note that cow's milk consumption actually might be a confounding variable, because maybe the participants who do not drink cow's milk were lactose intolerant, and that increases the likelihood of developing the disease. All of these issues can be handled statistically, but I wanted to make sure you were aware of this. So in your handout, there should be a blank graph for you to complete with this example. So researchers from UCSD wanted to explore the link between maternal SSRI use and persistent pulmonary hypertension in newborns. So they had 377 women whose infants had the disease. The control, they matched 836 women whose newborns did not have the disease. They did maternal interviews to determine the medications used in pregnancy and potential co-founders, including demographic variables and health history. So, using the blank grid in your notes, please complete it for this study. You can pause the video right now while you're doing that. Okay, I hope you completed this on your own to assure that you understand, but here's how I would fill it out. We had 377 mothers of infants with the disease, and we matched it to 836 mothers of infants without the disease. And then we did interviews to find out if the mothers used SSRI during pregnancy or if they didn't, and we do the same for the group up here. And then we compare the numbers to see if using SSRIs during pregnancy actually did have an association with the infants developing the disease. So, case control studies, strengths and weaknesses. First of all, they're fairly economical, fairly low cost in the situation we had there. The hardest part was probably matching the cases and then doing the interviews. They are short in duration. It's in some ways like cross-sectional because you just do it at a snapshot in time, but you are looking at a comparison of two groups. It is ideal for studying rare diseases. So that's where it might be difficult to distinguish the disease from the general population. And they typically provide what we call strong statistical power. So that has to do with the math behind probability, but they are a good study if you set them up correctly. However, they are observational, they're not experimental, meaning we just let things occur the way that they occur and we don't manipulate any of the variables. So the measurement of exposure is established after the development of the disease, which is another weakness, because if you remember the criteria of causality, it said that the exposure had to occur before developing the disease. And then prone to both recall and observer bias. So what that means is that if you have a case control study and you're asking people to recall things that happened long ago, like how many fruits and vegetables did you eat, or how often do you use your cell phone, sometimes if you ask them too far back, they don't really recall well. There's also sometimes observer bias. So if you have the people doing the interviews are biased certain ways against certain people, you could have bias there. And then also they don't capture the timeline of the disease